Hello and welcome to Sharing Jewish Wisdom.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good. You look very boisterous this afternoon. I bet you've been reading these books again. One of these days, I'd really like to borrow a couple of them if you don't mind, because you've got such a wide selection, and mine at home just don't match it.
It's true. Good. So every week we read the Haftorah, week in, week out, every Shabbos. But do you know what the Haftorah is? Well, today Reb Shlomo is going to explain to everyone what it's all about. So carry on.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, we were discussing it last time. And I said to our viewers and victims that we would in fact be looking at a specific Haftorah. But just before we do, I think it might be useful to take up your extremely incisive point and talk a little bit about where the Haftorah comes from. Because as you say, every Shabbos, every Yom Tov, we read the Haftorah. On major fast days at Mincha, we read a Haftorah. So it's got to have some value. So the word Haftorah, the root of the word, it is potor, which means exempt. Now, it doesn't mean that you're exempt from listening to it when you go out to the whiskey club or you go out to powder your nose.
Or you go out for the kiddish.
Or you go out for a smoke or whatever people do. No. You see, originally the Torah was read in public, which I suppose you could say we do now because anybody can walk into a shul. But during the times of the Roman occupation, what happened was that they banned the reading of the Torah in public. And it was, I believe, on pain of death of anybody found doing it. So the sages at the time had a think. Must have been nice for them. And they came up with an idea. And they thought, if they found some sort of passage in the prophets which had the same theme consistent with the theme in the Sedra of the week, part 1, and part 2, they got some youngster to stand up and read it. Well, the Romans wouldn't take any notice of a little boy of 9 or 10 standing up there reading it. And because it was done that way, it kept the connection with what would have been the Sedra of the week. And therefore, if you like, the tradition carried on. Well, once the Romans had gone on their merry way to Rome or wherever they were going, the tradition was kept on. And thus we have a Haftorah for every occasion when there is reading from the Torah itself. That is the background to it. Right. So, yeah, you were about to ask me.
No.
Oh, I see. Your eyes lit up for a second, which
I've just learned something.
Oh, actually,
go.
so have I, but we won't go into that. Right. So we were going to talk, and we're now going to talk about the occasion, which happens a couple of times a year, when Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh coincide, which means that the normal Haftorah relating to the Sedra of the week is not read, but a special Haftorah is read which relates to Rosh Chodesh. Fine. So where does it come from? It comes from the book of Isaiah, chapter 66, which is in fact the very last chapter in the book of Isaiah. Most people don't realise it runs to 66 chapters. And he must have used up a lot of ballpoint pens in putting all that together. But in fact, if you look at the Haftorahs, they are predominantly from the book of Isaiah. Right. So this is his parting shot, as it were. And the Haftorah for Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh is very much in two parts. The first part is God's message rebuking us and criticizing us for the way that we, shall we say, used and perhaps abused the rituals of the temple. And God expresses his displeasure. and basically says, well, children, this isn't good enough. And the message there is quite strong in the way it, if you like, condemns the people. Now, what is perhaps interesting in looking at the shortcomings of the Bnei Israel at the time, that there is a verse in chapter 66 at verse 13, which a lot of people will find familiar. And it says as follows, Ki ish asher emot lachamenu, kain anochi alechemchem uv'Yerushalayim tnuchomu. Now, whilst everybody is familiar with the original Hebrew, let me just translate it, and then we'll see where it appears.
That's right, where it originates from.
Right.
Yeah.
Just in the same way that a mother will comfort you, so I will comfort you, and in Jerusalem you will be comforted.
Right. So that's from the Shiva, isn't it? From the Shiva service.
Bang on, 100%. You get the star prize this week, Mark. Yes, it's one of the lines read, unfortunately, in a house of mourning for the particular prayers that are read for the mourners, and that's why people may say, "Oh, yes, I've heard that before somewhere," as you quite rightly said. And so the whole tenor. That's tenor. We're not slipping anybody a tenor. The whole tenor of the Haftorah moves from starting with criticism or rebuke, but moves on to comfort. Okay?
Right.
And as you know, softness is a thing called comfort, if you do your own washing. That is the way that it then moves on. Now, in a way, it is a comfort in advance for the times when the temple wouldn't be here. But it then moves on even further and starts to look ahead as a promise of better things to come. Now, that may sound like a politician who may have been recently elected somewhere in the world, telling us that better things are coming. But I can trump that and tell you that, I couldn't resist that. This is all very topical for our viewers. That verse 22, which is well into it and not far from the end, then talks about God's promise to make a new heaven and a new earth. Now, this has excited the minds of the commentators because, of course, how can you have a new heavens and a new earth? There's one particular commentator called Ibn Ezra, who was a medieval commentator in Spain, and he explains it in a way which I find very palatable. And he says like this: you don't get a new heaven, you don't get a new earth. What you get is the messianic era where everything changes into a much more spiritual way. And so although the heavens and the earth are still there, they have, if you like, a different perspective. Quite what that will be, I can't say. And therefore, once that happens and Mashiach arrives, so the rituals of the temple, which is where we started with the criticism at the beginning of this, will be replaced by renewal of the temple, the restoration of the sacrifices, the korbanos, the position of the priests officiating the temple, and so on and so forth. And this is, if you like, God pointing out that here is an opportunity for people to look at where they've gone wrong and doing something about it to bring about that redemption.
Interesting.
Finally, Wait for it. Don't get too excited.
Big finish.
Yeah, big finish. Yes, absolutely. I think he was 6'5". Big finish. That there's a very interesting phrase towards the end of the Haftorah, which talks about the, if you like, the settings or the structural settings of the months and the Sabbaths. And it's not easy to say if you've got wrong teeth in it. Exactly.
Yeah.
What it seems to be trying to say is that with the destruction of the temple, the whole setup of the daily sacrifices, the weekly sacrifices, the festive sacrifices, all went because there was no temple to officiate it. But when this all comes back, the calendar, if you like, and the order of service will once again be replaced as it was originally.
Yes.
So it is, if I can put it this way, concluding with a real message of hope. And I think it's appropriate to say, since we both seem to be wearing poppies today.
Land of hope and glory.
Well, I'm not going to sing, but perhaps we need to look forward to a time when there will be peace, particularly in our beloved land of Israel, and that the time will come sooner rather than later when all these problems that we face will disappear, and that the promises in the Haftorah will come to pass. So we can look forward to that in due course.
Lovely. Thank you. Amen.
The next Haftorah that sort of jiggles about in the order of things will be Shabbos Chanukah, which is in fact not that far away, because we're now into Mar Cheshvan, so we are looking at 5-6 weeks away. You may get a presentation before then, so keep calm. We won't forget you. And by the way, if you have any comments, any likes, because you won't have any dislikes, will you? And also, if there are things you'd like us to do, to talk about, to make the subject of presentations, please feel free to tell us, because we don't know what you're thinking. We have enough trouble thinking ourselves. So perhaps you'd like to do some thinking for us and make some comments and say, well, we'd be interested to see this or that or the other. And we would do our best to satisfy your requests.
Please click the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel for some great content.